So, hi, hello. My name is Luis Diaz. I'm a nonviolent communication facilitator. I also practice it and share it. And I'm a really big fan of some podcasts. I started it a couple of years ago, a lot of with listening to Joe Rogan. I also listen to Lex Friedman, and I recently started to listen to the All In podcast. And even though I'm not an investor or I don't know too much about economics, I know some a little bit, but just as a fan more than as a specialty or as a profession. But I do really like how they share their thoughts, and I think they're how they talk and the points that they make are sometimes I align with them or I connect with them also. And I recently saw a discussion between Sachs and JCal that was a little bit, you might say, frustrating for me. Because I listened to a couple of things that they were not connecting. And I thought I'll give it a try to do a mediation between them, mediation without them, just listening to them and just pointing out a couple of details on how to better connect on this conversation, right? So let's start by listening to it.
On Ukraine, which I think is an interesting topic. You guys want to go there for a minute?
Sure.
Yeah, all right. Can I take a shot at explaining what the Chinese were doing? I think it was a clever diplomatic maneuver by the Chinese to try and grab the moral high ground here. They're basically saying, listen, we're interested in peace. We're going to put forward a proposal. The Americans fell into the trap of basically dismissing it right away, throwing cold water on it. The U.S. State Department has done this twice before. Remember, back in March of last year, Naftali Bennett from Israel tried to negotiate a peace deal, and he himself said that it was the West, the Americans, who rejected it. He thought it had a 50-50 chance of succeeding. You then had the peace process in Istanbul, Turkey, with Erdogan presiding over it. You had the Istanbul communique, which again, they were very close to having a peace deal, and Blinken and the U.S. threw cold water on it. So what's happening here is that the U.S. is not playing its traditional role as peacemaker. When we try to go in and mediate these conflicts, we're doing the opposite of that. We're throwing cold water on the peace process. Now, why are we not acting as the mediator? I'll tell you why. Because we are a co-belligerent. This is an American proxy war that we're fighting against Russia, so we have no interest in mediating a peace process. And moreover, we're not trusted to mediate a peace process because we're one of the combatants as peacemaker. When we try to go in and mediate these conflicts, we're doing the opposite of that. We're throwing cold water on the peace process. Now, why are we not acting as the mediator? I'll tell you why. Because we are a co-belligerent. This is an American proxy war that we're fighting against Russia, so we have no interest in mediating a peace process. And moreover, we're not trusted to mediate a peace process because we're one of the combatants.
So right up until there, Sachs has even like all the details, no, about the things he wants to share or the things he wants to talk about. But the question is he really, really sure why he wants to have this conversation? What is the intention of this conversation? Does he want to be understood? Does he want to understand other people? Does he want to make an agreement with other people? So that hasn't been clarified. So that's important when going to have a discussion to be really, really, really like clear. What is your intention of having a conversation? Is it only a debate? What are you looking for in a debate? Just to have your point, like to be more, how do you say, just being right? Or do you want to have a connection with the other person to make an agreement? So he stated all these words, no, or these statements, these objectives, the details about this situation, but we really don't know how he feels. He never mentioned how he feels. So does this frustrate him? Is it getting mad? Is it sad? Or how is he? This is some important information that you can express for the other person to know how does this affect you, right? And the other thing is the needs. What needs are are not being met by all this situation. That's also important to say. Is it the need for security? Is it the need for, respect maybe? Or a need for maybe some order? Or it could be just a need for having things to make like some common sense. That's also a need that it's like coherence is also like a basic need. And when you share this, it's a little bit more easier that the other person can like understand you. So let's go to Jacob to see what he says.
By Xi Jinping
Yes.
to take the global moral high ground. I
Yes.
agree with
Now-
that.
now
I,
where-
said,
now-
I said it on Twitter a couple weeks ago. Like this is amazing that he's starting the peace process. We want regime change. We want to deplete, and we want to ankle Putin. They want
Right.
to keep him in the game. The more despots there are, the worse, the better it is for them. They would like to keep the Legion of Doom going. They don't
Well,
want to
I
see
think
regime
it's-
change and democracy in Russia eventually. I don't think that's how they do it. But
Listen, Jacob's very.
So one other thing, he's talking about we want, and it's kind of difficult when you're having a conversation and you want to like really get into a more detail or a more connected conversation. If we talk about we, it's a little bit more difficult when you want to make an agreement, because the we doesn't talk about yourself. You can go from we to me, and you can sometimes play with that, and that also like can create disconnection, because you can either like take the advantage by talking about us, and also take maybe another route. Well, me, I don't want this, but us, we do want this. So it's another layer that we have to like think about when we talk on or when we have some conversations.
Close to getting it, but here's where I would disagree with you a little bit.
getting what?
Let me explain.
Okay. Go ahead.
So, from the Chinese point of view, the war in Ukraine is like manna from heaven.
Henry Kissinger.
Okay.
Two things are there. So he's saying from the Chinese point of view, now you're taking up another person's point of view. That's also like a little bit it can create some confusion, or it can create tension when you're having a conversation, because you're talking about other people. The other thing is that Jacob also said a joke. He said, "Oh, Henry Kissinger here." That thing also can disconnect. And why did he said that joke? We can ask him, or I can maybe think about it. And maybe he did that joke because he wanted to relax. He wanted to maybe de-escalate the tension of the conversation. Maybe he just did it for the amusement of the people, of us. But is that in the structure of the conversation? We don't know. So it makes it a little bit even more difficult for them, because one, they're trying to have a conversation or a debate. Two, they're in a podcast. So are they like having this conversation alone, or is this like a public space where they can have like are they supposed to entertain us? I'm not sure. So maybe that's the point about JCal. I'll make it a joke, like making all the video and all the podcasts a little bit more, not bearable, because it's really, really cool, but more entertaining. Is it? But what need is, so his need was to, maybe he was trying to sort of find a need of relaxing, of a little bit more, how you might say that, just to have fun. Maybe that's it. We don't know.
They love this war. Number one, okay, because it's interfering with the U.S.'s pivot to Asia. We were basically in the process of redeploying all of our force, all of our military, to containing them in East Asia, and now we're bogged down in Europe. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, we are massively depleting our stockpiles of weapons. We've used something like 9 years of Stingers and 5 years of Javelins, and we're running out of ammunition. I can't believe it. We're running out of artillery. The Russians actually have a 6-to-1 artillery advantage, which is why they're actually doing much better in this war than people are acknowledging. We should come back to that. The last thing is that the Chinese now are benefiting from the economic sanctions on Russia, because Russia is now selling them oil and gas and all of their minerals at a big discount.
A subsidy. Yeah.
So this has been a wonderful thing from the Chinese standpoint. So this is the problem with us thinking in this Marvel movie way of the world, in which we're the super friends and we're against the Legion of Doom, okay, is because there is no natural alliance in the real world between China, Russia, and Iran. These are three very different regimes with different types of governments who naturally would not get along. They would be adversaries. Naturally, they'd be suspicious of each other, as China and Russia were during the Cold War. but we have pushed them closer together. This is the problem with having this overly moralistic view of foreign policy.
Over to you, Jason. What do you think?
So one detail there. When you want to have a conversation that is connecting, you also want to verify that what you said was well received, or not well received, but well understood or understood. So an interesting thing that when you express something and it's maybe a little bit difficult, or maybe you talk for 5 minutes, you can also ask the other person, so what did you hear me say? And this way you can verify that, is it really what I said? Is the other person listening? Is the other person understanding what I'm saying? Am I being clear on what I'm saying? Maybe I have to make my points a little bit shorter. So this is one really, really interesting question. Like, I just want to know if what I said was clear, or can you repeat what I said? One other thing is that in nonviolent communication, we try to share what we feel and what we need also. It's a couple of points. But you can also say, like, can you understand? Or what do you think is important for me in this situation? What do you think it's important? So you let the other person like try to figure you out. You kind of like plant a seed of curiosity for the other person. And you gotta have it yourself too for the other person, right? So let's see. And this when Shamal, I think his name is, he intervenes. He does it because he wants to make it a little bit shorter, I think. I don't know what his reasons are for like being a mediator, or maybe his need of advancing, or maybe having, like, maybe he was getting a little bit frustrated that this is not going on nowhere. So he wanted to like, okay, I think so. Eh? So he wanted to advance the conversation to see, okay, let's move on. Let's be a little bit more efficient.
Is there a question? What's the question?
Yeah, I mean, you framed it as the Legion of Doom, so just explain.
Well, it's the axis of evil. The 50%.
Okay, two things, or one thing right there. The axis of evil. We also like get into judgments. When you have a judgment, it's not really an observation. Observations are a little bit more easy to digest, or can connect a little bit more easy. Instead of saying the axis of evil, that is a judgment, we can say, well, when I see these countries and they act in this way, that really disconnects it from me, or I'm really afraid when they do this. So you're a little bit more, that phrase is a little bit more accepting, or easier to digest, you might say.
Let me tell you,
Hold on.
Lex
I'll
Luthor
finish my
and
sentence.
Brainiac would not be working together if it weren't for us declaring a war on both of them at the same
Absolutely,
time.
actually, Pakistan, Iran, and China work together on nuclear technology. So they do, when it's convenient for them, work on things like nuclear bombs. So there is an affiliation, but you're correct. They're the 50% of the planet, of humans on this planet, who live under authoritarians. And so they're authoritarians. They're always going to think in their own interests. They're always going to think in their own interests above their own peoples, let alone the people of another country. They don't care. They don't care about human rights.
One thing, when we talk in absolutes, that also like you can very, very easy like say, but not this time, but not the other day. He's taking that, yes, they are authoritarians, and that also could I'm not sure if it could be a judgment or not. I'm in the middle. I'm kind of sure it is, but we can like agree that some regimes or some presidents or some prime ministers sometimes take advantage of their power. And yes, but when we talk in absolutes, it's not easy. It's not easy for a conversation. When you have a conversation with your wife, with your son, you never do this. And then they say, yes, but 2 years ago, I did do it. So it's not never. So when you talk in absolutes, it's easy to like to take down your argument, because you can say, but once, but in history. And the other reason is that you kind of disconnect.
Rights. They don't care about the rights of humans, and they certainly don't care about the rights of humans in another country. And the West is on a noble mission to spread democracy in the world, and that is a noble thing worth fighting for, and is worth defending free countries from despots. I know that you are a fan of these folks.
Two things right there. He said like it's a noble mission. So for him, it's something deeper. It's about the war, yes. It's about people maybe suffering, but he's starting to like maybe show a little bit what he feels about this. It's important. What's important for him? For him, maybe it's important security for all people, and maybe a little bit later on, he's gonna talk about unity. So that unity is also important for him. So when just let's go. Let's see what happens next.
Sachs apparently, and you think they should be able to run amok.
One thing is that he's trying to put things that the other person said in his mouth. Now you might say, or he's saying, yes, you think like this. He thinks like this, or he says that, or yes, they say that. So you're already taking a position about the other person's position. That's kind of disconnecting, and you see this. You see like Sachs to get a little bit more frustrated and disconnected about the conversation, because he sees that he's not. I don't know what his intentions was at the beginning, but his intention is not getting like satisfied. You might say.
I will take the other side of it. I think the West should act in unison. The only criticism I have is that we're not acting in unison. I would like to see the West, instead of sending Biden to Ukraine,
Hold on.
I would rather see, I'd like to have 20
You've
of
talked
them.
enough. You just accused me of somehow being fans of these people. Where did I ever say that I was a fan of Xi in China or Putin or the Ayatollahs in Iran? Hold on.
You said we provoked Putin. Putin invaded another country.
Hold on.
You said we caused it.
I said,
chose
hold
to
on a
do it.
second. Hold on a second.
Right here, they get into a debate about I don't know if it's the right word, like semantics. Like you said, like what is the specific word that you said? And that's sometimes the little details that can like frustrate a conversation. If it's a debate, I don't know. If it's a debate and you just want to win, yes, you can use it. If you want to have a conversation where the two people get together and have an agreement, then talking about those little words or those little details, let's clear them out. Say, okay, did I hear you say this or not? Yes, no. So when I hear you say this, it really, really bothers me, or I really get hurt, or I get frustrated, or I get mad, I get sad, whatever, because my need for maybe like unity is not being satisfied. So when we talk about these needs, like they're on the bottom, it's a little bit easier to have conversations and to reach agreements. They won't reach an agreement. Sorry to spoil your viewing, but yes, it's maybe because they didn't share like the deeper stuff that it's important for them.
I am arguing for a geopolitical strategy that benefits the United States. I'm on Team America. Your policy of driving these people into an axis of evil is foolish for the reason I said, which is we are going to power up the Chinese economy so they are a much more formidable enemy to the United States. That is the last thing we need to do. Now, with respect to... Hold on a second. We finished. You had a chance. With respect to Ukraine and Putin there's no question that Putin invaded, okay? He is the aggressor. However, the question you have to ask is why? And the fact of the matter is that, first of all, we fomented a coup in Ukraine in 2014. This is your democracy spreading that you like, is all of a sudden we got these NGOs and we got Victoria Nuland from the State Department in there basically fomenting these coups. It doesn't work out quite the way you think, J. Cal. That's problem number one, okay? Then we try to run NATO right up to Russia's border, okay? And you expect them just to accept that because we're a benevolent superpower. That's not the way the real world works. Putin was tremendously threatened by that, and it wasn't just him. It was all Russian elites. Read the Bill Burns memo from 2008, Niet means Niet. He explains that even the liberal elements within Russia were tremendously threatened by NATO expansion. That is what basically poisoned diplomatic relations between the United States and Russia, and it was a major cause of this war. Now, listen, just because you don't think it's provocative doesn't mean that the Russians don't think it's provocative. You have to be able to put yourself in the other guy's shoes for just 1 second. And the fact of the matter is there were diplomatic steps.
That's kind of important. He's saying about, I have done this before too. Like, it's important to put yourself in the other guy's shoes. And you may ask yourself, is Sachs putting himself on J-Cal's shoes to understand him? I don't know.
That we could have taken to defuse this crisis in this war, and we didn't do it. And now look what's happened. Hundreds of thousands of people have been killed, and Ukraine's been destroyed. It's been absolutely destroyed. And let me tell you right now, it looks like they're losing this war. So I don't see where your superhero policy has gotten us, except to make China richer and more powerful and to destroy Ukraine. That is where your naive idealism has gotten us.
That's another point. Like when you start to have this conversation, and then at one sense, and at one point, you tell the other person that they're naive, it's also like creates that disconnection. It's beginning to fall apart, all this connection. And what was I going to say also? Okay, these two people like J-Cal and David Sachs, they're really, really intelligent people. And it just goes to show you that sometimes we're not used to having conversations. Sometimes we're more used to having debates or getting what we want, or we're not used to it. And it's important. It's important to know how to have a conversation. And for me, I like to say that nonviolent communication really, really helped me. Like have this process like integrated in my life to have conversations that are efficient. So just by sharing what you think, what you feel, what you need, and to have a way to satisfy those needs. So, in one sense, when you start name calling the other person, disconnection.
Yeah, I would say if left to your devices and you're not engaging and not presenting a united front against Putin, he will invade country after country. The West must fight for democracy. We must fight for human rights, even if it's uncomfortable. And you seem to think we provoked him to invade this country. He's a murdering dictator, authoritarian, who has been murdering his own people and other people for his entire career, and he will continue to do so.
Let me clarify, because you're putting words in my mouth, okay? When you say that I think that we provoked him, what I believe is that we took actions that in Russian eyes were provocative.
Yes, you said we provoked it.
I'm saying that from their subjective point of view, they saw these actions as provocative. They said so. Listen, the Russian
which is what I said back to you. We provoked it is your position.
No.
Yes.
I just explained it's not the words I would use.
Hold on, his position is that in their eyes they were provoked,
Yes.
Jason.
You're talking about, no. What?
Oh, shit. Oh, boy.
You're like, what you're doing right now is like dishonest. I just explained the language that I would use.
Right there. So dishonesty, calling someone dishonest. I think that the reason is that it wasn't like clear what was the structure of this conversation. What are we wanting? What do we want? What does Jacob want, and what does David want? What are their intentions? When you have really, really intentions between the two of them, it's much more easier to reach an agreement.
Yes, we provoked them.
We took actions that in Russian eyes were provocative. There's a difference.
Yes, provocative, provoked. Yes, the act of provoking
Just stop
them.
line, okay? It's going to get too much.
Okay, let's move on. We're never going to agree on this, Sachs. Okay. And
one thing is also important. It doesn't matter if you agree or not. The other thing is, do we understand each other? Does Jacob understand the needs that are not being satisfied by this war? And does David understand the needs that are not satisfied by the other person? So we can understand each other in one level, but we don't have to agree. But understanding each other's needs gives us a better option, a better chance of having like an agreement. So that's important to notice. It doesn't matter if you don't agree. It matters if we understand each other, if we know each other's needs.
I mean, I'd like to remind the audience that nobody on this podcast is an expert on foreign policy. Sachs is not Henry Kissinger. You know, I'm not Obama. So
On last
take
week's
whatever
show,
we
hold on a
say
second,
with
Jake.
a
On
grain of
last
salt.
week's show, you had come around to my point of view.
So maybe I'll close it up there. There's one more interesting thing that happens, but just to let you know that all the things that I want to say, like, let me see. Yes, to clarify, what did you hear me say? That's one advice that can work in a conversation. From the beginning, to have a clear intention of this conversation. What is this? What am I talking for? What am I talking to you for? To have a clear intention, to separate it if it's a debate or is it a conversation. It's my intention to be understood, to understand the other person, to change their mind, to reach an agreement, or what? I think. Oh yes, when you talk about things, you have to really, really own them. I think this, I feel this, I need this, and to separate it when other people do it. No. What else? And one thing, like he said, they're not Henry Kissinger and they're not Obama. So that's also important. This is like a political subject. I have my own views, but in this case, I just wanted to show details of conversations of how to better them, or how to make it more efficient, or how to fuck them up also. Political issues, okay. It doesn't matter if it's real or not. Okay, when you're also talking that maybe it's real or not what they're saying, because information changes all the time. But if you always talk about the needs that are not being satisfied, that's when you're gonna get connection with the other person. So I talk about structure of the dialogue, of the conversation. Yes, okay. And the things that are not going to benefit a conversation are going to me assuming other people's view, making jokes, generalizing. The other word was talking in absolutes, never, always. Sharing judgments. You can share a judgment, but you can also add what need is not being satisfied by that judgment that you have, and putting words in the other person. That's gonna disconnect the conversation or unplug it. And one other thing that I said, these people are really, really intelligent, and they also know a lot of things about the stock market and economics, political, but sometimes just the more basic thing, like my mom said when I got married, just have less. The thing is gonna help you out, it's communicating. Have good communication with your wife. They don't teach us that, or I wasn't taught that. More likely, they don't. I was doing the same thing. I wasn't taught that, and it's really, really important to have little ways of having a more efficient conversations.
You said this war was a
Which one?
mistake. On the very last
listen.
show, you said it was a disaster. And now you're basically
No, hold it. Now you're
backsliding. Hold on, you're
I
backsliding
believe
right
the
back to your
West-
Legion of Doom.
No. I believe the West should present a united front, and we should hold the line with Russia invading other countries. That's my belief. I do not think we should be doing this solo. I think we should not be sending Biden. We should be sending 15 leaders of countries to Ukraine. We should be sending people in, and we should be doing a peace process. And I think the military-industrial complex, largely driven by the GOP, is what's at fault here. They want to use these weapons. They want to replenish the supply, and they want to regime change. I don't think we should be going for regime change. I think we should be building bridges. So my point is a little more subtle. My point is a little more subtle.
You're doing it right there. You're basically engaging in this ridiculous rhetoric that we've seen in the media, which is that if you simply want a more real...
Ridiculous rhetoric. I'm definitely gonna miss a lot of details about this conversation or this debate. But I'm riffing, you might say, right now. So I know I'm gonna get a lot of things I wasn't gonna miss a lot of things, name callings that I didn't catch at the moment, but just ridiculous. Also it's name calling, judging.
Realistic American strategy because you believe it benefits America, that you're automatically accused of somehow being a Putin sympathizer. No, you're doing what the mainstream media has done.
No, I'm not. I just said to you, it should be the entire West as a group, as a bloc, negotiating with Putin.
What do you
and
think?
negotiate peace. And
What
I
do you
think
think,
it's
Jason?
fine
What do
for
you,
Xi Jinping to be part of that. I welcome Xi Jinping, Germany, and the United States, and France, and the UK all getting together
Jason,
and trying to get these two parties to settle.
what do you
That
think
is
we're
my
doing? What do you think we're doing right or wrong with China right now?
Right or wrong
What
with
do you
China?
think? Yeah, what do you think?
So right there, that question. What's the objective of this question? It's only like it's starting to go maybe a little deeper, but look at him. He's like thinking about it. He's trying to like internalize the question, and that's good. The only thing is that question also, it's only talking about the situation or the levels of the situation, like details about the situation. And the interesting thing is that when you share more about how you feel about these details and what needs are being met or not being met, the frustration or the importance of unity or the importance of a community, that's when you get really a connection, a conversation that connects, and it's easier to reach agreements.
We're doing right and wrong, or right, wrong, or
I think we should be.
Also, right, wrong, it's also a judgment. So maybe we can like change a little bit what for you has worked in this situation, or what hasn't worked. Right or wrong, because maybe for him it's right, but for the other person it's wrong. So it's a little bit not difficult, but it's important to have those little differences.
Be in discussions with them consistently. I don't believe we should be isolating them. I think we should be looking for areas we can collaborate on. The environment, technology.
But you agree with the CHIPS Act. You agree with basically onshoring and nearshoring all the critical infrastructure we need. Is that?
I think we should not be dependent on any foreign. We should have energy security. We should have medical technology. Of course, yes. But I think every country should. I think China should have that. We should have it. Every country should aspire to be resilient and not be dependent on another country. And being dependent on a dictator like Germany was on Putin, or we were with China for medicines or for, medical equipment or chips, we do not want to be in that position ever.
Let me ask one question, just on Ukraine, just for a second, Jake Al. Would you be willing, in order to achieve a peace deal for Ukraine, would you be willing to agree to two things? Number one, that Ukraine would be a neutral country instead of part of NATO. And number two, that we would recognize Crimea being part of Russia. Would you be willing to give those two things?
I think that's not up to me. I think it's up to the people of Ukraine and Russia to sort this out. And it's up for the West to set the table for.
Yes, right there. Maybe the question could be a little bit different. I have to like think about it a little bit. But on the answer, that's when you can take advantage of things. Sometimes it's for me when I can talk about myself, or I can talk about the other people. So it's also like important when you have a conversation. Who are we gonna talk about? Are we gonna talk about ourselves? Are we gonna talk about the politicians? Are we gonna talk about the people? Who are we going to talk about? Who am I gonna represent? Because if it's all three areas or all three different groups, and myself, they're included, it's easier to make a mirror. Make a mirror, so I don't have to show what I think or what they think, or to just be correct, or just to have like the upper knowledge about the question. No?
Them to do it, and part of setting the table for them to do it is to make it more painful for them to stay at this war. So if they are told, if you keep fighting over these things and you don't come to a resolution between those two parties who have to live with that resolution, that is the uncomfortable thing that will force them. And that could be China, us, and India all working together, all of us working together to force those two parties into a solution that works for them.
We have Brad for 10 minutes. I want to move on.
Okay.
I want to
So that's about it. Let me check it out. Let me check out the question again to see if I can, or maybe just the question. The question was, I think it was okay. not okay, but it was clear. Maybe you can also ask the question like, would you be willing? Let me hear what you can say, like, ask the question, and maybe the other person has to repeat the question. Something around those lines. But I'll check it out again.
Well, let me ask one question, just on Ukraine, just for a second, Jake Al. Would you be willing, in order to achieve a peace deal for Ukraine, would you be willing to agree to two things? Number one, that Ukraine would be a neutral country instead of part of NATO. And number two, that we would recognize Crimea being part of Russia. Would you be willing to give those two things?
Yeah, I think the question is very clear, and it's willing. That's the choice of the other person to see if they agree or they don't agree. So, yeah, it's a very clear question, and I hope that from this little exercise I did, you get a couple of points. Maybe I'll write them out, like so you can see them, and hopefully you don't know what my position is, and hopefully you also thought that I was for JCal, and that I also was for Sachs. So this is the not the game, but my objective, to see the two people's sides and to see how they can have a more efficient conversation. Okay, so my name is Luis Diaz. Hope you enjoyed this video, and see you around. And if I get the likes, maybe this can like push me to do a couple of more exercises like this. See you around. Bye.